Welcome, everyone. I'm Allison O'Toole, the proud CEO of Second Harvest Heartland. I am coming to you this morning with an urgent call for action. We are just weeks away from a coronavirus-driven surge in hunger that will be like nothing we've seen since the Great Depression. If we don't get ahead of this, the jump in hunger will deepen and broaden the impact of this pandemic. We must act now. I'm proud to welcome David Fiocco of McKinsey Co to the conversation. David is one of our stellar Second Harvest Heartland board members. He is also the Smart for Miles researcher who has positioned us to understand and get ahead of the new hunger. Virginia Merritt, a friend of mine and fellow food banker, is here to help me tell the story of our response plan. We stand together in representing the Feeding America food banks in Minnesota. We also stand in partnership with the mighty network of nonprofit food shelves and hunger relief programs that work alongside us to keep everyone safe and fed during these tough times. I'm glad to be surrounded by such talented thinkers and such a giving community right now, as we will all need the smarts and compassion, all the smarts and compassion that we can muster. Come Labor Day, when unemployment and other benefits run out, an additional 275,000 Minnesotans, including 112,000 kids, will be hungry. This is hundreds of thousands of us newly living with the desperation of hunger while also facing the greatest economic and public health crisis of our time. We expect to see demand at food shelves jump by 65% across our state. That's a whole lot of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, folks, and it's going to take every single member of this community to get it done. Before COVID, local food shelves stocked by the food banks like Virginia and I run were reporting record traffic. 1 in 11 Minnesotans were affected by hunger. By August, we expect that to be closer to 1 in 8. That's people right here in our community facing this pandemic hungry. And the increase in need comes as supply chains tighten in response to pandemic pressures, making it more difficult and expensive to get the food we need. Essentially, COVID-19 has changed the food supply chain, forcing us to rely more heavily on purchased food, just as food has become more expensive. Despite this difficult news, I have faith in us. The first step in solving a problem is to understand it from every single angle, and that's what our partner teams at McKinsey Co are famous for. David Fiocco, lead researcher on this endeavor, will now dig in and introduce the research behind the coming hunger surge. David, welcome, and I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks so much, Allison, and thanks so much for the opportunity to join you this morning and to share the story. It was a privilege to be a part of this research with Second Harvest Heartland. I think, like many of us perhaps assumed that in the early days of the pandemic, as we heard the news of unemployment surging and businesses closing, we believed we were in a short-term crisis. And I kept waiting for the reopening to happen, a few days later, a few weeks later. As we realized that this crisis was stretching on even longer, I think one of it became very clear we needed to understand what the future demand would look like. And as we stepped back and dug into the research and began to study the relationships between unemployment and food insecurity, we realized that the pandemic and the closing was only the beginning of the challenge, and that actually the recovery will take much longer. And as we learned from many previous recessions, the recovery will take months, full quarters longer than it takes even to reopen. Just to give you a sense of the cold hard numbers here, between now and the end of the year, we expect the Minnesota food banks will need to distribute 86 million pounds. That's a 65% increase from the distribution in 2019 in the same period of time. And as you see from the chart, the demand is only continuing to rise as we get into the summer and fall, and some of the immediate unemployment benefits that were available and short-term stimulus benefits were available begin to expire, and more vulnerable people are on their own to meet this need. You know, I think then the challenge is, what is the supply, and how are we going to be able to meet that need? And what we've seen is there's been a really impressive response so far, but the meal gap that we'll need to continue to close, you know, will be particularly important as we look ahead. And so I want to draw all of our attention to the months of August, September, and October. As those subsidies expire and the need increases, Allison is going to tell you about the hard work Second Harvest is doing to begin to continue to close this gap, so that we can get much closer to the 86 million pounds and how we get there. What I will say that gives me hope is, you know, this is no longer a mystery. We have a model that can be updated on a quarterly basis that shows us how demand is evolving. We'll be able to track the latest unemployment statistics. We'll be able to track the latest data from food banks and agency partners around the country and around the state to understand our patterns. And then we'll be able to isolate at the county level specifically where the opportunity is, how we expect that to evolve month by month, and then what we can do to fill the need for a food category, for a county, for a vulnerability in the supply chain. So, you know, by using this data and by taking a forward-looking approach, I'm excited to see the way Second Harvest is evolving its mission and being able to respond real time to where the need is and when the need is happening. And that swift response will allow Second Harvest and the food banks throughout the state and the agency partners to be ready to meet need before it happens, and really to keep this crisis at bay. Allison, why don't I turn it back to you to share how Second Harvest is doing that?
Yeah, thank you so much, David. Information is so powerful and motivating. So thank you for all of your work. And now some better news. Hunger can be kept at bay, and we have plenty of food here in the Heartland. We just need the resources to source, store, and distribute it. And here's how we're going to get it done. We will raise the funds to cover the $21 million it will cost to feed the newly hungry in the next 6 months. We will continue to adapt the way we deliver food so it can be delivered safely and at the new larger scale required. We'll advocate for greater state investment in our programs and in SNAP or food stamps, which is the bedrock of the hunger relief system. And finally, we know it's hard for community members to ask for help, and we need to all strip away the stigma that's associated with visiting a food shelf or applying for SNAP. To survive COVID and thrive, we're all going to need to ask for a little extra help. There is no shame in asking for the help of your community and the grace our neighbors offer us. The hunger relief community has demonstrated its ability to respond to the crisis if given the right resources. And Virginia, I will turn it to you now to tell us a little bit about how you are doing in Southern Minnesota at Channel One Food Bank and what you're seeing. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks so much for having me today. And thanks to all of you who are tuning in and want to learn more about hunger and the work that we're doing. Channel One serves 13 counties in Southeast Minnesota and La Crosse County in Wisconsin. And we also operate the largest food shelf outside of the Twin Cities area here in Rochester. So beyond Rochester, almost our entire service area is rural. Southeast Minnesota has responded generously during this difficult time, and volunteers have packed, socially distanced, of course, over 35,000 emergency food boxes and counting. But we know that we still have big challenges ahead of us. The biggest challenge that Channel One faces is the capacity within the region to distribute food. So the only food shelf in our 14 counties that has enough cold storage to distribute a significant increase in fresh food is here in Rochester at Channel One. So practically what that means is that our refrigerated trucks have to do mobile pantries across the region in order to distribute that significant amount of fresh food. A lot of our food shelves don't even have the refrigeration space to distribute a gallon of milk per family compared to a half gallon of milk per family. And so it's resource intensive. You have to have a driver, get the truck there, make all the arrangements in order to do these truck to trunk distributions. But we know that in the rural areas, these distributions, these mobile pantries are so important. One pantry guest told us that she had driven 16 miles round trip to get groceries and left with nothing because the prices had jumped so much she couldn't afford anything. She said, "I'm happy I at least have some dry beans and rice to keep me going for a while. Hope it gets better soon. I can't afford to drive to bigger towns, which are 50 miles round trip. As a homeowner, I can't just pick up and move to a larger city, and I wouldn't want to with all that's going on in the world anyways. I'm half a century old and haven't eaten healthy as a person should, simply because I can't afford to. I work and all my money goes for bills and medicine." And when we run these mobile pantries, we'll pull up and there's already 200 cars waiting in very small towns. So we know the need is there and that these folks are relying on our ability to distribute the food to them. Another big issue that our food shelves are facing is serving the homebound. Many counties have reached out to food shelves and asked them to deliver food to people who are homebound because they've tested positive for COVID and don't have another resource. And so our food shelves are happy to be able to find a way to do that. But again, that's resource intensive doing that home delivery. An example of food shelf that's doing the home deliveries, both for seniors who are either homebound or should be staying at home right now, and as well as people who test positive for COVID, is the food shelf in Steele County. Other shelves are partnering with transportation services like Hiawatha Land Transit, which is using bus routes for deliveries in Rice and Goodhue counties. Another problem, which Allison has already mentioned, is the stigma of using food shelves. Pre-COVID, we would have clients tell us, "I didn't come to the food shelf until Mom, wasn't eating dinner, until I had to water down the milk." And we just really wish that people would come to us before the situation was that dire. That's why we're here. We are the social safety net. And, here in the Med City, what we're seeing is that families who are solidly middle class, working medical jobs that are more entry level, but they probably got a certificate or a little bit of continuing education beyond high school. Once you put a furlough or a layoff into that family, their middle class existence is seriously jeopardized. And these are probably folks that were donating to the company food drive, even sending Channel One $20 in better times. And now they're having to grapple with needing the help themselves. And so at a lot of our mobile pantries, we see people who don't usually come to the food shelf. And we're just really trying to encourage everyone that the food shelf is there for anyone who needs it. At Channel One, 70% of our clients pre-pandemic reported that someone in the family was working. We are here to serve the working poor and the working middle class that is going through a tough time. And our doors are open, and we hope that people feel welcome and unashamed to come here.
Thanks, Virginia. Like your teams, we are seeing families who have never considered asking for help before in need of a little help to make ends meet. And I know both of our teams and our other food bank and food shelf partners are working around the clock to keep folks safe and fed, but it's going to get tougher, as David has shown here. Let's come together to make sure none of our neighbors have to face this virus hungry. I think of it like this: there is so much we cannot control during this crisis. But what we can control is how we show up for one another as a community. What we need from the community now is to show up like they've never shown up before. I am immensely moved by the generosity of Minnesotans. And that's what gives me hope when I think about the tidal wave of demand coming our way, because it can be overwhelming for our teams. But every contribution makes a difference. Every dollar donated means a little less desperation during these truly difficult times.
Thanks so much, David and Allison and Virginia. Appreciate the conversation tremendously. So lots of good questions coming in. Please keep them coming. We're receiving questions via email, via the chat in the Zoom, and posted on Facebook Live. First question is more of a statement coming from Thomas in the Mankato area, and you all might just want to comment back to him. He says that the hardest part of all this work will be normalizing food shelf use. For old guys like me, he says, it feels like asking for help flies in the face of how hard we've worked our whole lives. And then he just says, I'm glad you're talking about this. So it sounds like there's gratitude for that work to kind of pull away some of the stigma and shame that folks might feel about using a food shelf for help. So panelists, anything that you want to say to Thomas and other folks who might be feeling like that?
I'm happy to start, Elizabeth. Thank you, Thomas, for tuning in and for talking about it with us. That is part of the reason, part of our responsibility as this nonprofit safety net in our communities is to talk about this so we do strip away the stigma. And so thanks for joining today. You know, I always think that asking for help when you need it is actually a sign of strength, and it's a sign that you trust our community. I sure trust our community right now. We have stepped up in ways I never expected us to, or expected us to have to do that. So as Virginia said, everyone is welcome. We work alongside just this mighty network of food shelves and meal programs and other hunger relief organizations that feel the exact same way that Virginia and I do. So thanks for joining us. And I don't know, Virginia, if you have anything to say to Thomas or not, but I know we're on the same page.
You know, no one ever feels bad for using their health insurance when they have an injury. So maybe people can think of us as kind of like their safety net food insurance. We're so proud to be here for when people need us. And now is that time. So just think of us as your insurance, and please use us when you need us.
And if I just comment from the data, by August, we expect 1 in 8 people in Minnesota will be having a hard time putting food on the table. So if you look around the room, this is not, you know, this problem is affecting everyone. And as we mapped the data of where unemployment was happening, all categories of jobs, blue collar, white collar, in every county around the state, we were seeing people who are likely to be affected by this crisis. So I think we should recognize this is a challenge for all of us.
That's really well said, everybody. Thanks so much. We have another question from Raquel in Minneapolis. Why have you already seen an increase in needs? So she's noticing this sort of spike that we're already experiencing in the last few months if we've expanded unemployment benefits and implemented programs like Pandemic SNAP.
Do you want me to take that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, Allison, if you would start us off, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thanks, Raquel, for the question. It's such a good one. And, you know, the bottom line, and I'll just be very straightforward here. Not everyone is getting those stimulus payments. Not everyone who is eligible for SNAP or those pandemic SNAP benefits have signed up. In fact, I learned yesterday that there are 150,000 families across the state who are eligible for those SNAP extra SNAP benefits who are not taking advantage. If anyone is listening or watching us today and they need help, please, we will put resources in the chat section. Go to toharvest.org. I know we are our SNAP team is in the highest gear we've ever had. I know Hunger Solutions Minnesota is helping too, but there are so many folks who don't know they're eligible for the help. And that is why we're already seeing that surge, Raquel, but great question, and thank you.
Absolutely. David, a question for you from Janine in Prior Lake. She said, these seem like big changes for our community in a short amount of time. As a researcher, can you comment on the scale of this change? Have you ever seen this type of deep and broad social change in such a short amount of time?
It's a great question. As we started the research, we went all the way back to previous recessions to look for a past analog. One of the places we started was 2008 and 2009, and it was different. You know, that was a recession that kicked in more slowly. It affected households in different ways. We didn't turn the economy off in the way we did here. Then our team went all the way back and looked at the Great Depression. Frankly, that's the very best analog we have to this level of change. And the spike in unemployment that we saw in the second quarter of 2020 was significantly faster than even Great Depression era changes. You know, just to put in perspective, we went from an unemployment rate in the state around 3% to an unemployment rate in the state now that's at 10%. You know, there are parts of the region that are seeing significantly higher than that, and projections that we could be up to 16 or 18% unemployment by later in the year, depending on how we see the pandemic resurge. So it really is, you know, I can take any word, unprecedented, historic. You know, the speed of the change that we're seeing is really unique. Now, Second Harvest and partners have done a better job responding more quickly than we've ever seen in a crisis before. So that gives me some hope, and that has helped to mute this. And some of the benefits and stimulus packages that we've seen have also helped to provide a bridge. But the thing that we can also take away from these past historic events is that recovery is not a 1 quarter or 2 quarter effort, but you know, our projections really show that we'll be in this situation until late 2021 at best. You know, so I think we should continue to use those lessons from history and not assume that we will recover faster than we have from these types of recessions in the past.
Excellent. Thanks, David. All right, we have a question from KSTP, Jessica with KSTP. How does this impact schools? I know school districts are offering free food to anyone under the age of 18 this summer due to COVID. Will schools continue to be more of a resource? Allison, can you get us started on that one?
Yeah, and then I'll pass quickly to Virginia too, because she probably has some pretty good frontline information on this. Schools are certainly a backbone in this whole effort to meet the need, and they are feeding so many kids, you know, every day, who sometimes it's their only meals that they get at school, and so we are very focused there. I do know that there's some information, Elizabeth, maybe we can put it in the chat too, about summer meal programs. There's an app, Free Summer Meals, that you can go and find those resources. We want to make sure every kid is fed this summer. You think about how much energy is expended by kids in the summer. We don't want kids to remember this as their hungriest summer ever. And so we need to support those programs. You know, the state has a big role in that too, but we'll put a little information in the chat as a resource too. But Virginia, you probably can comment on this too.
Yeah, so thanks, Allison. So what schools have available varies widely, depending on the district and what the district offers. So not every school district offers summer meal programs. Some do and some don't. At Channel One, we're trying to coordinate with the schools. We have backpack programs across the region. So that's where students get a packet of food on Fridays during the school year to take home and tide them over for the weekend, because kids were coming to school hungry on Mondays otherwise. So as soon as it became apparent that schools were going to close, we took all of our inventory on hand of backpacks and pushed them out as quickly as possible. So multiple kids get the food out of our warehouse and to the kids. And then we coordinated with several school districts, as have other food shelves, to have boxes of food coincide with the delivery of those school meals. But we call it the last mile in food banking. It's not easy to always get the food directly to the kids. So for example, Rochester Public Schools were putting meals on buses, driving them out into the community. They also had school sites, and they were only reaching a third of the kids that were eligible for free and reduced lunch. And so what is the barrier? How can we get the food that last mile into the home of children? Because we know that it's so important. So we're all looking at our efforts and how we're delivering the food. And then we're getting ready to release a survey to all of our partners that we typically have backpack programs with to say, what is your school's plans for the fall, if you know? And then what will the meal programs look like? Is backpack going to be appropriate, or is it going to have to be something different?
I wonder if, Elizabeth, maybe I'll say one more word on this too.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about summer meal programs and just how critical they are, but this also highlights how critical those SNAP benefits are. Those SNAP benefits, all the emergency, the flexibility that the state has received around the SNAP program, pandemic SNAP, extra bonus payments this summer to help families cover those summer meals. I cannot reiterate enough, we want to make sure everyone who's eligible has access to those benefits. You can go on toharvest.org. We will put more information in the chat about where to access that help. But again, as I said earlier, I found out yesterday that 150,000 Minnesota families are eligible for the benefits, but are not yet signed up. We want everyone to get to get those benefits so they have a more secure summer.
Right.
But the SNAP program plays a critical role in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And time is of the essence on that one, for sure.
Yeah,
Great.
Elizabeth, maybe we should say that too. The deadline for those pandemic SNAP benefits is next Tuesday. It's June 30th. And so whatever, I just plead with media outlets on this call that we get that word out. We need these people to get the help they need so those kids can have meals this summer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Allison, for making that point. We have one for you, David, from Jill. Is the predicted surge based on only the projected unemployment rate increase, or are there other factors that go into predicting the increase in need?
Yeah, there is a complex relationship. You know, our friends at Feeding America have spent years researching the linkage between unemployment, poverty, and food needs. And how that translates into specific demand. And they've also then helped us understand the relationships between unemployment insurance and SNAP benefits and how other programs can help then reduce that need. So we've taken all of that into account as we thought about the relationship between the changing unemployment and poverty levels and the needs that we expect at Second Harvest and in the state more broadly.
Thanks, David. That's fantastic. Just a reminder for everybody on the meeting, feel free to click on the Zoom chat function to see the resources that we're posting right now in response to these questions. And those resources will also be available on Facebook. So one additional question from Tony in St. Cloud, who says he wants a little help. He says, I've never used food assistance before. how do I start? I need to begin to ask for this help. Allison and Virginia, you want to tag team on that one, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Tony, thank you for tuning in. We are here to help. Go to twoharvest.org, connect with us. We are so happy to help. Hunger Solutions can help as well. There are directories of food shelves in your area. We work with so many of them. They are wonderful partners and believe, like we do, that this is, this is truly our mission to help in times of great need like this. And Tony, I encourage you to, explore on our website the SNAP program. We can help, and those benefits are so critical. And so thank you so much for tuning in. We stand with you in getting through this, and just are happy that you're reaching out, and we're here to help. Virginia, what would you say?
Well, actually, we know that St. Cloud has an awesome food shelf.
We were just there.
We were just there for a meeting, a really robust offerings available. And so call your local food shelf. Hunger Solutions has a hotline that you can call to find your local food shelf. Also, 211 is a really good resource as well. They can connect you locally to where to go. And then, follow the links on Second Harvest website and really look and see if you qualify for SNAP. And, especially folks who haven't qualified for assistance before, especially with food shelves, we're now serving people up to 300% of federal poverty. And that's a bigger group of folks than we've been serving before. So even if you haven't qualified for things before, if you need the help, please check it out, because times are different right now. A lot of the guidelines have changed.
Excellent. So helpful. Thank you, ladies. So panelists, we have made our way through the questions. I think the conversation was so important, and I appreciate it a ton. Any final thoughts before we close the conversation?
David, do you want to start? Anything? Any wrap up?
So I think data can be intimidating, but data can also be comforting, because it gives us a clear sense of what the challenge is. And I'm so confident, as I've looked at the response from corporate partners, from donors, from the government organizations, that we can really ramp up to meet the needs. I would just remind us that needs are both the food and, as Virginia said, the last mile. So we need to make sure we have a plan both to increase the amount of food we're sourcing and the way we get that food out to communities. So today's conversation of understanding how do I get started and how do I get help is so critical to where we're going. Again, I want to make sure we're all ready for what's coming in the late summer and the fall and beyond. And we continue this conversation we see today as the beginning and not the end of what will be a challenging 18 months. But I'm glad we started the conversation now.
Thanks, David.
Thanks. Virginia, you want to go next?
Sure. Thinking like way back to March, which feels like forever ago, we just did not know what was going to happen. Back at that time, we were even wondering, like, if there's a stay-at-home order, does that mean we get to be open? We were just trying to distribute food out of our warehouse as fast and effectively as possible. And so having the data about what we can expect is just so helpful. Then we're not ordering food and just taking a stab in the dark. And, if you're wondering the best thing that you can do to support your local food shelf or your food bank, it really is a monetary donation, because then we can order food by the pallet and ship it out effectively. As we're still using volunteers here, but the amount of people moving stuff around that it takes to really sort through those food donations, it's so labor intensive. So everything is appreciated, but at Channel One, $1 is 4 meals. And so we've just been blown away at the positive response for the community. And so I know it's going to continue. So thank you.
And I'll just, Elizabeth, take a minute here to reiterate something I said earlier. Come Labor Day, when unemployment and other benefits run out, 275,000 Minnesotans, including 112,000 Minnesota kids, won't know where their next meal is coming from. And despite this difficult news today, and I really truly believe, like you said, David, information is power. We have the information now, and I have faith in us, in this community, that we can get through it. We need everyone, we need all hands on deck, and we need everyone to continue to step up to support us, whether it be with, making it okay for our neighbors to go to a food shelf, or giving financially to food banks and food shelves across the state. We need this community to stand up, and we stand alongside it, and we will get through this.
Thanks so much, Allison. And thanks to all panelists and attendees. We are getting a half a dozen questions about where folks can find more information. So I think everybody agrees with you both that information is power. And I want to put a shout out for our website, toharvest.org/hunger surge is where you can find more information on the study that we shared. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. Take care.